You're listening to the DolphinsTalk.com podcast network.
You're listening to the DolphinsTalk.com podcast, the most listened to daily Miami Dolphins podcast on the internet. Come on, Dolphins fans. Time to fins up.
All right, Miami! Miami's got the Dolphins, the greatest football team. We take the ball from goal to goal like no one's ever seen. We're in the air, we're on the ground, we're always in control. And when you say Miami, you're talking Super Bowl. 'Cause we're the Miami Dolphins. Miami Dolphins. Miami Dolphins number one. Miami Dolphins.
Hello, Miami Dolphins fans. How are you today? And thank you for listening to the DolphinsTalk.com podcast. We are here with our post-draft special, a deep dive into all the Miami Dolphins draft picks to talk about how they're going to sort of work with the Dolphins both in the short term and in the long term, and look at all the prospects and talk about scheme fits and stuff like that. I am your host, Michael Leva, joined by our in-house draft guru, Dante Collinelli. Dante, how are you doing today?
Doing good. I feel like we're going to have a lot of conversations about the long term based on.
Well, that's kind of where I'm going to start. But before we get to any of that, as always, a big shout out to everyone listening at finheaven.com. Everyone go to finheaven.com, largest Miami Dolphins message board on the internet. Also, a shout out to our friends at the folks at the I Am a Miami Dolphins fan Facebook page run by the great Carlos Hernandez. If you're on Facebook, please be sure you are part of the I Am a Miami Dolphins fan Facebook page. And wherever you're listening to this podcast, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Podbean, Podchaser, Audible. We're on all the platforms. Hit that subscribe button right now. You don't want to miss an episode of any of the shows that we have here at the DolphinsTalk.com podcast network. All right. Yes. Heading into this draft, the main question I had was not even as much about the players. If we take this guy versus that guy, this guy versus that guy, it was more about what's the vision? What's Chris Grier's vision with this roster as we move forward, knowing you're going to pay Tua big money soon. Waddle is going to be up soon. Phillips is going to be up soon. Javon Holland's really kind of up right now as we speak. What's the game plan of how they will construct this roster? Will they use this draft to look for short-term answers to have guys get on the field right away to help them in 2024? Or are they going to use draft picks for more of a long-term vision of guys for pieces they're going to need moving forward beyond 2024? And I think the answer is crystal clear, kind of like you hinted, Dante. They use this draft to get guys, yes, they're going to play in 2024, but they're not going to play significant snaps in 2024. They got pieces for the future. When we pay Jalen Phillips, Bradley Chubb's time's over. Look, we got Chop Robinson and Mohamad Kamara. Oh, we're going to pay Waddle. Tyreek Hill's time's going to be over. Let's start to replenish the wide receiver room by adding two guys who aren't Tyreek Hill, but will play hopefully in time and be contributors on some level. Oh, Armstead's talking about retirement. And once we pay all these other guys, his contract becomes, even if he wants to play and there's a change of heart, his contract's not sustainable. Let's get him out of here and have Patrick Paul ready to go in 2025 and beyond. Not so much this year. Same thing with Raheem Mostert. Guy, wrong side of 30. Everyone loves Mostert. Had a big year last year. We know he's closer to the end than he is the beginning. His time here is going to be limited. Oh, we're going to have Achane and Wright moving forward. Let's get those pieces in place now for 2025 and beyond. And it's less about getting guys who are going to come on the field right away and play. Now, of course, Robinson and Kamara have to play right away. We literally have nobody else. But with those other guys, they can bring them along slowly. And I think that's probably the vision. And I think what we're going to do for 2024 is post-June 1st, sign more old guys on one-year deals on the wrong side of 30 to help the team win in 2024, whether it's a Risner, Odell, a safety, who the heck knows, like that. But this draft is about 2025 and beyond. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would. I would, and I would probably agree to the degree that I don't think I think they need to sign some edge rushers. Like you just said, like, hey,
yes, they do.
Chop and Mo are going to play because they have to. But I don't think that there's and we can get into this when we go pick by pick, but I don't think that that's a good place to be as a team. And look, this is one of those drafts, generally speaking, where like I see the vision. Like I get it. I understand why they made the picks they made. If you look at who was on the board when they picked at 21, I think that makes you feel, at least that made me feel a lot better about the Chop Robinson pick, right? The top offensive tackles are gone. Fatanu goes one pick in front of them to Pittsburgh. The top edge rushers are gone. Jared Verse went 2 picks ahead of them, right, to the Rams. So that made me feel significantly better about taking a player like Chop Robinson. And I think that just kind of set the tone for the rest of the draft. They let the draft come to them, and they were comfortable taking players who might not get on the field right away or might not play significant snaps right away, but will help the team in the future as they, Tyreek Hill's contract gets more expensive, as they pay Javon Holland, as they pay Jalen Phillips, as Teron Armstead's contract gets more expensive. So it makes sense. I see the vision. Now we're going to talk, and I have gripes with individual picks that were made and the expectations that fans are setting on some of these players, I think are not ideal. But generally speaking, I see the vision. I understand why they did what they did. And if it works out, they're going to look like geniuses. I mean, they're going to look so smart if these picks hit. But if they don't, they're going to look really stupid, like really bad. This is like boom or bust draft. It really is, because there's a version of history where Chop Robinson becomes an all-pro edge rusher, and there's a version of history where he's not very good. And so we'll see what happens. But yes, definitely planning for the future, which makes sense. I don't hate it. I really don't. I don't think it's a bad idea. At the same time, this year's team.
Oh, I've said, look, Dante, here's the deal. And, fans of the Dolphins, I'm one of you. I love you. We all love each other as fans of the Dolphins. But that reporting the first week of free agency, and I was actually told it the week before, and I got the podcast to prove it, this year sort of being a pause year or a step back year, it's 100% true. And every one of these draft picks proves it. Every free agency move they made proves it. Now, some Dolphins fans don't want to believe it. And I think when they hear pause year and stuff like that, they think tank. It's not tank. It's not that they're not going to win. They'll win 9, 10, or 11 games most likely. They're going to be in the mix. But the point is, they lost to Wilkins, they lost to Hunt, and they did absolutely nothing to even try to replace either one of them. They were like, we're not going to spend, look, he got 27, I think, per year, Wilkins. We're not even going to spend 20. We're not going to spend 19. We're not going to spend 18. We're going to sign like 6 guys on like less than $2 million a year. Like that's what we're going to get our cap in order. We're going to try and stockpile a few comp picks. Hence why they're able to make a trade this year to get back in around 4. They're going to make, or around 3, 4. They're going to, do that kind of stuff we're going to get like 1-year players like Shaq Barrett, who'll be 32 in season. Jordan Poyer's just turned 33 last week. You're dependent on old men to just get you through one more season before these kids they drafted are hopefully ready to step up into larger roles in 2025. That's what a pause season is. It's not tank. It's just, we're going to sit tight. Let's see what we got in Cam Smith. Let's see what Achane can do in year 2. Can he be a lead back moving forward? I don't know. He showed some flashes last year. He's still a smaller guy, but can he and Wright be a 1-2 punch moving forward where Achane's the 1A of the group? Let's find out. Stuff like that, we have to find out. Can any of these offensive linemen step up and be like a right guard of the future we can sort of depend on? Maybe Liam takes a step this year. I don't know. Crazier things have happened. Can Robert Jones learn how to pass block? I don't know. Crazier thing. Like, can we find out? Because they didn't spend big money anywhere. In post-June 1st, they had a couple pieces. They won't be big money. It's going to be more old men on 1-year deals who are Band-Aids. And that's what this was. And this draft kind of proves it.
Yeah, I agree. And look, like, I don't want to mistake me saying, hey, I'm a little bit worried about the team this year to say that, like, I think this team is bad. I think this team's good. Like, this roster is still good.
Where they were last year. It's status quo.
I think this is still a good team. I think they're going to compete in the AFC East. I think they can win the division this year for sure. I think they can win a playoff game this year for sure. They're talented enough. Talent's not the problem. I think they have good coaching. I think they have good players. I just, you look at this team and you go, man, they got no pass rushers. relying on a really thin safety depth, right? If you were going to talk about Patrick McMorris, like he might just make the roster out of the fact that he's the third safety on the team. Like seriously, there's nobody else.
Yeah.
It's Javon Holland, Jordan Poyer. They have Elijah Campbell listed as a defensive back, right? Because he kind of goes back and forth. True third safety, 6th round pick, Patrick Morris from Cal.
I do think they'll sign one post June 1st because that is
right
now.
They should.
When you look at what's needed, safety's top of the list. I think more so than right guard. Everyone's so focused on right guard. Folks, when Chris Grier said you're more worried about the offensive line than we are, I know it was a year ago. It stays true to today. You're more worried about than he is. Maybe he signed someone for sure, but
hear those words
they could kick exactly. He's going to live in. He's going to die by them, or he's going to look like a genius someday.
Yeah.
I think with all the injuries we had last year on the offensive line, it was still the number one offense. And people go, but we didn't beat good teams. Wasn't because of the offensive line, because their head coach abandons the run game too much, calls some goofy plays at times when it's 3rd and 2 and you're averaging 8 yards a carry, throwing a sideways pass that makes no sense. And he goes for it on 4th downs at times that make no sense. Right before halftime of the Ravens game, when you're getting your butt kicked, just get to halftime and maybe mount a comeback in the second half. He's rushing, he throws a pick. I mean, he does goofy things. If the head coach can just call a decent game, he doesn't call bad games, but just sort of improve what he does. The players were not the issue on offense, not even the injuries. It was some of the decision-making at times in big moments. The defense is where they took a hit this year. And I know everyone thinks Kendall Fuller is like, I don't know, prime Deion Sanders. He ain't. Like the passer rating was like 120 against them last year. Gave up 9 touchdowns. And it ain't all because he played for Washington. Some of that's on him. Andrew Van Ginkel was a young ascending player for $2 million, and it was only $2 million. We want Shaq Barrett instead, who's a guy wrong side. I mean, to me, that blows my mind the most. So my issues are in defense. The offense, I think, is going to be fine. Yes, they have to add a third wide receiver. They will. And they have to add a safety. They will. But the major problems are in offense. I think safety and third wide receiver, top of the list, post June 1st. They're going to run out there and get 2 guys. I don't know who they are, but we all know the names that are out there. I don't know. They'll get 2 guys to at least, once again, hold the fort for a year until the 2025. These kids are coming. That's what I think it happened this week.
No, I agree. We're in lockstep there.
Yeah. Okay. So let's just start here. Let's just go through it. Pick 1, round 1, pick 21. Chop Robinson, edge of Penn State. Again, what you said a few weeks ago came true, kind of. The drop off from edge rushers to round 1 to like the later rounds, even round 2, most years historically is steep. Well, if they didn't take Chop Robinson, they were screwed because he was the last one kind of in that top tier ish, even though it wasn't the top 3. There was those top 3, then there was like Chop sort of all by himself in the tier. If they didn't take him, they would have been screwed. So I understand the logic. It's a need. Now, if last year played out, no injury to Chubb, no injury to Jalen Phillips, they're probably not taking Chop Robinson here, but they need an edge rusher here in the worst way. So Chop Robinson, what are your thoughts? And one question for you, because you would know best. I've been trying to think who he reminds me of, and it's kind of tough, but coming out of college at Penn State, total athlete, raw, someone you know quite well. Is he like a poor man's Hassan Reddick out of Temple? Am I close with that?
So I think there's some similarities there.
Right. But is there a lot of similarities there?
So. I think where I see the similarities between those 2 players is like role and play style. They're both like lighter, more athletic edge rushers. And I think generally speaking, you would call them better pass rushers than run defenders. Now, I think Hassan Reddick's done a nice job of making himself into a functional run defender, but I don't really want him taking on blocks unless he absolutely has to. And I feel the same way about Chop. So I don't hate that. That's not bad. I see the vision there for sure.
What are your thoughts here on Chop and how he fits in Miami?
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, when I heard that Chop Robinson was the pick, I was taken aback. I just didn't expect him to be someone that they would go after. I didn't expect all 3 edge rushers to be off the board at 21, as well as the top 4 tackles. I thought you'd get one of those players to fall to you, especially given that 6 quarterbacks went in the top 12, which, good God.
Peter Schrager was right.
Yeah, he was. You know what? And that's why he's where he is, and I am where I am, right? So, but in all seriousness, though, like I think when you looked at where the Dolphins were, who fell to them, what the board looks like the Chop pick just makes a lot of sense in that context. And that made me feel a lot better about it. So getting to the player, I think Chop's one of the most athletic pass rushers I've ever scouted, like period. Like if you're just pure athleticism in a bubble, we're not talking about any type of playing football, like dude who runs fast and changes directions really quickly. Chop is one of the best edge rushers athletically that I've ever scouted. His burst is crazy. If you go to my Twitter right now, you can see a couple of the clips that I posted of him against Michigan. I mean, he's in the backfield before the tackle's out of his stance. There are some reps on his tape that are like some of the freakiest things you'll ever see on a football field. The problem with Chop is that he's just an athlete. There's not much else to his game. When he's winning at the NFL level, right now, it's going to have to be all speed and athleticism. Speed, bend. He's going to have to beat tackles out of their stance consistently. He doesn't know how to use his hands. He doesn't have pass rush counters. He doesn't really have a pass rush plan. His pass rush plan is run really fast and hope he ends up at the quarterback. And so you're going to have to build all of those things from the ground up. There is no repeatable pass rush move on Chop Robinson's tape. None. Not an initial move outside of a speed to power rush, which he doesn't use enough, and he's got short arms, so it's really not that effective in the first place. You are going to have to build his hand usage from the ground up. That doesn't make him a bad player. That's where he's at. And you'll see teams take edge rushers like this in the first round every single year. Every year, there's two of these guys, right? Dallas Turner is more refined than Chop Robinson, and that's why he went a little bit higher. But he's the same mold. You could say a lot of the same things that I'm saying right now about Dallas Turner that you could say about Chop Robinson. He's just a little bit further along than Chop. So Chop's on that same track. He could be that top of the first round type edge rusher. There's just not a lot of technical refinement to his game. The other limitation that he has is one that I mentioned earlier. His arms are really short. His arms are like really, really short. And that matters because as an edge rusher, one of the things that you're dealing with is offensive tackles with really long arms. And so that makes it easier for them to get into your chest and control reps and out leverage you and wash you out of plays, specifically in the run game. And you see that a lot on Chop's tape. Chop's not an NFL run defender right now. I don't want him on the field on first and second down right now. He's too light. He doesn't have the core strength. His arms are too short. You either need to play a defense that doesn't care about setting the edge, which I don't think the Dolphins are going to do this year, or he's a designated pass rusher for you in 2024. He's a player who gets on the field on third downs, and you don't want him on the field on first and second down. That's how I see Chop right now. There's so much upside to his game. I sound very negative, and I don't feel that way. I like Chop. I think he's a good football player. I think the Dolphins, given what was on the board, I think they made a solid selection with Chop. I think they have a realistic chance of developing him into a good football player. But at the present moment, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And what worries me about the edge room is Shaq Barrett, and we'll get to Mohamad Kamara later, and Chop Robinson. To me, those are three designated pass rushers. To me, they're the same person in 2024. I don't see an edge rusher who plays on first and second down on the Dolphins roster right now, which is why I think they need to add like two players to that room post June 1. I don't think they will, but I think they should. And so with Chop, it's just, look, all the athleticism in the world. There's a version of this where he ends up a defensive player of the year in the NFL. Like he has that upside. There's also a version of this where he doesn't develop and he gets like 3 sacks in 3 years. So you really have the high variance. You are betting. The other theme of this draft for the Dolphins is they are betting on their own internal development above all else. Every player that they took in this draft needs some work. None of these guys are finished products. None of these guys, I don't even know if we're going to see a day one starter from this group for different reasons, but generally, I don't think it's because
we really shouldn't, honestly.
Right.
We
shouldn't. And so they are betting on their own internal development, which as a Dolphins fan has not been great across my 24 years. However, we've seen strides in recent years under Mike McDaniel in that area. So I understand why they're doing it, but it's risky. It's high risk, high reward. And Chop Robinson is just like the poster boy for high risk, high reward. I like him. He's a good player. Think he fits the scheme. He's an outside rush linebacker. But right now in 2024, he's a designated pass rusher. If he plays more than 30% of the team's snaps, I think something's gone wrong this season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing, and everything you said, I totally agree with. I do think they're going to have to play him more, at least the first half of year one, just because literally nobody else at the moment. I'm sure they're going to sign a guy or two, but they don't have anybody. So that has to be factored in. And, that might help or hurt. It might help in some ways, like throw him in the deep end. He'll learn on the go. Or if he just becomes so overwhelmed, he'll just beat himself down and have zero confidence, and it might ruin the kid. But the other part of this is, and there's some Dolphins fans who don't like the pick and stuff. If they didn't pick him, who did you want them to pick at 21? Because, I'm guessing most of those fans didn't want them to take a corner, and none of the corners were really gone yet prior to that pick. They were all there.
That was going to be my answer.
That would have been your answer. Yeah, but you're unique, though. Most fans wouldn't have wanted that.
No,
if they would have took a
corner
it. Or any of the wide receivers, whether Thomas or Worthy, fans would have went nuts. Graham Barton, I get it's a plug-and-play day one guy, but he's a guard, and we know Chris Grier's not taking a guard in round one. No. So you might have wanted him. He wasn't doing it. And then we look at the tackles, Jordan Morgan and Tyler Guyton, they're just as much raw at offensive tackle as Chop Robinson is at edge rusher. So pick your poison. I think, to me, he was kind of the only pick, only because of the injuries to Chubb and Jalen Phillips. And when we start comparing to the next pick, Patrick Paul, to some of the offensive linemen who went, I would say, from Chop Robinson and between Patrick Paul, the gap there is less than the gap between Chop and the next edge rusher, I would say. Or that's probably what their logic was.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the only other guy I might have considered there was Jerzon Newton, but he ended up falling to the second round. So he was just not on that level for anybody. And so you kind of take him out of the equation. I would have taken Terrion Arnold or Quinyon Mitchell and been happy about it, but I don't think the Dolphins were ever in that spot. So that's why I kind of said at the top, when you look at the board, you look at the Dolphins' needs, you look at Chris Grier's draft history, Chop makes a ton of sense in context. And I think it's a good pick. I do. I like the Chop pick at 21. It's not the perfect pick. I wouldn't give it an A+, but it's a good pick. It's a reasonable dart throw at a position of need and a position of value. If Chop hits and he's I don't know, he doesn't have to be a 20 sack a year guy, a 10 sack a year guy at pick 21, It's incredibly valuable. It really is. You get 5 years of control on that guy. That's great. So if they hit here, it's going to be awesome. And it makes a lot of sense, right? They got a little bit unlucky with how the board fell at the end of the day. And I think they made the most of it.
All right. Now, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. I just want a one-name answer. Chris Grier did admit after he made the pick for Chop, he tried to trade back into the bottom of round one. The $1 million question is, for who? I think most reasonable people think it was for Xavier Worthy. I would probably tend to agree with that. If it's not him, I don't know. Looking at the draft at the end of round one, I don't think it would have been for a corner. I think maybe an offensive tackle or Xavier Worthy. Who do you think, if you had to bet a buck, he was trying to trade in for at the end of round one? I'm thinking it had to be wide receiver because the run on wide receivers, that's where it kind of started. From Thomas to Worthy to Pearsall to Leggett. I'm thinking, knowing him and knowing what they like, he was either trying to move up for one of them or he was in love with Tyler Guyton or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I think receiver makes a ton of sense just because he said did he say that they tried to move up and they couldn't, or they tried to move up and they didn't?
It was just too expensive, he said, I think.
Okay, so that it has to be a receiver, right? Because what's the trade up at the back end of the first round? It's, hey, Kansas City offered 32, and the Dolphins were going to offer 55 probably, and the Bills.
And you probably don't want to part with the first next year or something.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even be surprised if Brandon Beane just hung up the second he saw it was South Florida area code. So
and then you got some of those other teams there. Some of those other teams like San Francisco probably, they also wanted a wide receiver. We're not trading up. So some of those other teams, like a team like Arizona, is probably no, we need as many good players as possible. We're not trading up, or they're not going to trade out from there. And unless they're getting a first next year, no one's making that jump. Even a second next year might not have been enough. It might have been a second and third next year. He's probably, I can't do that, Grier. So that's probably where it got too rich for his blood. But he tried. I'll give him credit. Okay, pick 2. This is where we're going to spend a lot of time. I got a feeling. Patrick Paul. It's funny. There was a mock draft probably 2-3 weeks ago. Somebody, I forget who put it out. Patrick Paul to Miami in round 1. I tweeted out, Dante within 10 seconds goes, that's like the most horrendous thing I've ever seen in my life. Patrick Paul in round 1 is horrendous. Then we do a show. I bring up Patrick Paul's name. Dante goes round 3 or 4 at the earliest. There's no way this guy should go in rounds 1 or 2. And you list off a laundry list of flaws. And then as soon as pick 55 is read as Patrick Paul, I start laughing. Dante, has your opinion changed on Patrick Paul a little since you've done probably some more tape work on him since the pick was made? Let me just say this, and then I'll just let you go. Patrick Paul has the size, I would say athleticism is good enough. Arm length, if you're building offensive tackle in the lab, you want Patrick Paul. Got a ton of experience, which works for him and against him. For him, that's great. Against him, how come he still doesn't know some of this stuff? So that's like the double-edged sword. The pass blocking, in my opinion, and I'm not as well-versed as you, ain't as bad, ain't that bad. Like, it ain't that, there's still stuff to work on, don't get me wrong. But at times in pass blocking, he can anchor like a naval warship. He's tough to get around. But in the run blocking, there's a lot of work to be done there. And just, what are your thoughts on Patrick Paul? I don't think it's a horrendous pick, but it's also a pick where if this guy's on the field this year, take out life insurance on Tua. I think he'd need it. It might be ugly.
Yeah, this was I laughed too, by the way, when they made the pick at 55. My initial reaction was laughter because it was just like seriously. Here's the thing with Paul is like, I agree with everything you said mostly. I'm not going to sit here and argue about the size. He's huge, obviously. That's a great box to check. I think I'm a little bit lower on his athleticism than some. Is kind of as I've fiended through the takes, I've realized that I don't think he's a bad mover, but I don't know, man. Like, I watch him on tape and I'm just like, yeah, sure. Like, I think when I think about good movers at his size, like Amarius Mims moves like a tight end. Talisi Fuaga's much better mover. Troy Fontenot's smaller than those guys, but he's bulkier and better mover. Like, Jackson Powers Johnson's a better mover, and he's like a gird. He's built like a fire hydrant. Like, Paul's feet look really heavy to me. Like, I don't, and to a certain degree, it's not his fault. He's 6'7", 330 plus pounds. Like, guys that big are not going to move that well. It's what makes players like Amarius Mims go at 18 and players like Patrick Paul go at 55, right? Like, that's the difference, the discrepancy between those players, right? So I think Paul's athleticism is okay. There are two reasons that I'm lower on Paul than I think a lot of people are, and why I'm the most skeptical of this pick is I'll set my pre-draft analysis aside for a second, right? I'll set my biases aside. My worry here is, one, the thing that you said there at the end. This is a player who's played 3,000 snaps almost at college. You know how many snaps that is? That's double and then some of Chop Robinson's snaps at Penn State. This is a player who's played 3,000 college snaps almost, and is going to be 24 years old when the season rolls around. His technique is a mess. It's a mess. It's not good. He's the worst hand placement I've seen in an offensive tackle prospect in a few years. Like, it's bad. It is not good. He is going to get called for holding on like 60% of his pass rush snaps at the NFL level if he doesn't fix that. They don't call holding at the college level like they do in the NFL. He is going to get called for holding every single time he plays a player with a little bit of quickness, because he is constantly grabbing the outside shoulder pads of players. And college rushers are going to work at, in law firms in a few years, so they're not going to be able to get out of that. NFL rushers are going to quick. They're going to jerk him inside, and the ref's going to see the jersey pull because his hands are outside and not inside. He's going to get called for holding a lot. So for me, if you play 3,000 reps, and the biggest knock, even the people who like Patrick Paul, the biggest knock that all of them have on Patrick Paul is that his technique's a mess. If you play 3,000 snaps and your technique's still a mess, your experience is not a plus. It's a negative. That's my problem. Because if you are 3,000 snaps into your career and you still can't get your hands inside the chest plate of a defender, what are we doing? And again, like, this comes back to the Dolphins betting on their internal development. And that's fine. I think when you look at the profile of somebody like Chop Robinson, who's 21 years old, elite athleticism, and who's played like roughly 1,000 snaps in his career, that to me screams upside, because there's a lot more for that player to grow, right? we said a lot of similar things about Austin Jackson when he came out of USC. Now, what separates Austin Jackson from a prospect from Patrick Paul is the same thing that separated him from Amarius Mims. Jackson's a significantly better athlete than Patrick Paul. Okay, so Austin Jackson's 24 years old now. He just had his first good season. If Patrick Paul follows a similar trajectory, I'll shave a year off because Austin Jackson missed a lot of time with injuries. That means Patrick Paul has his first good season at 27 years old. That's 3 years from now, right? Like that's my problem with this pick. You can set like the film analysis that I did aside. I don't understand. Like Patrick Paul does not have the profile of a typical developmental high upside player. He doesn't. He has some tools that you can work with, and that's great, right? It doesn't mean like I'm not saying all this to say like, oh, Patrick Paul's a disaster or whatever. Like there's a version of history where he becomes a perfectly cromulent left tackle. And that would be great for the Dolphins. I'd be over the moon.
Left tackle, middle of the road.
Phenomenal, right? Like that's great. Pick 55, you get an average starting left tackle, sign me up every day of the week. The issue here is that like the Dolphins are betting on a player improving who's had ample time to improve already. And my concern with this pick was less about drafting a player that they think they can make better and being a little bit arrogant about how they can develop talent. That's my concern, because if you draft a player like Tyler Guyton, who obviously not on the board at 55, like Guyton is raw because he hasn't played a lot of football. Right? With Patrick Paul, like I'm at the point now where it's not like, oh, if I can coach him up, he's just going to take off. I am concerned about why you're not better than you are. You just said he's got all the physical tools in the world. He's a 4-year starter, played in the Big 12 this year, Power 4 conference. The coaching at Houston, I'm sorry, it's not that bad. I'm not saying it.
That's what I'm saying. There's an offensive line coach at Houston right now going, good luck with him. I tried.
That's what he's saying. I'm not saying the Dolphins can't get Patrick Paul to be better. I'm not saying that they won't get him to be better. I'm just saying you have a long way to go and you have shortened your window of opportunity because this is an older player. If Chop Robinson's bad for 2 years and it takes you until year 3, he'll still be 24 years old when he breaks out. Patrick Paul will be 27, 28 on the same track. And again, this is not just an age thing, right? Okay, let's bring the analysis back.
There's no fifth-year option either.
There's no fifth-year option,
by the time he gets good, he's going to be gone.
That's what I'm saying. If Patrick Paul, if he played less football, I'd actually like him more. I think the experience is working against him. All right, let's bring the film analysis back in here for a quick second. There are some things that Patrick Paul does well. I think he's got raw power. Again, I think he moves perfectly fine for his size. I wouldn't call him a plus mover, but he's a good mover. Sure, check the box there. He's got the size. He's difficult to get around when the ball gets out quickly just because he's got vines for arms, right? There is just literally more space that you have to cover to get around Patrick Paul than to get around the Jordan Morgan, Troy Fontenelles of the world, right? And that's why arm length matters. That's why we spend all this time talking about arm length. Paul has that, and in an offense like the Miami Dolphins, where Tua's throwing the ball, in a half a second every time, maybe that's enough. Maybe that gets you there, right? Maybe that is good enough. We saw Austin Jackson take a lot of strides because the scheme did a lot of things to help him, and then it extenuated some of the things that he did well. So if they can recreate that process with Patrick Paul, I think you can get a solid player out of it, right? So he does that. He's got power. He can move guys in the running game. His leverage is so bad. He plays so high. Run block, pass block. There are so many reps where there are short dudes who just get into his chest and just toss him to the ground because they have leverage. And it's dude, you're 6'7", 337 pounds. This 6'2", 250 guy cannot be throwing you onto the ground. So we got to get him lower. We got to get him leverage. We got to get him more in control. So look, there's things that Patrick Paul does well. There is a starting caliber offensive tackle somewhere in the profile. I am less bullish on his upside than the Miami Dolphins are. That's what it comes down to. I am more skeptical of a player who played almost 3,000 snaps in college suddenly developing at the NFL level, because I think we do this thing where we say, oh, well, NFL coaching is so much better than college. And that can be true. Let's assume in this case it is. The NFL is a lot harder than college. And I would tell you that the gap between playing college football and playing NFL football is much bigger than the gap between college coaching and NFL coaching. It is harder to get better at the NFL level for most players than in college. And that worries me. Now, for Patrick Paul, if things go perfectly, by the way, I don't think he beats out Kendall Lamb in camp. I think if Teron Armstead goes down, I think it's going to be Kendall Lamb.
I don't want him to anyways.
Yeah, so hopefully he doesn't play this year. That's best case scenario. So if any team was going to drive, if Patrick Paul is going to be successful in any team, it was going to have to be a team that didn't need him this year. And theoretically, much to my chagrin, the Dolphins don't need him this year. So that's good. There's some positives here. I think the Dolphins, look, if it hits, it's going to be great. I hope it does. Nothing would make me happier than being wrong. I love being wrong about Dolphins draft prospects. That's great. It's great news. I would be happy. I'm not going to root against the kid. I'm going to root for the kid, obviously. I cannot imagine watching Patrick Paul's film and putting a second round grade on him. I can't get there. I rewatched his tape. I wrote an article about it. I can't get there, man. I really can't. His tape's a mess. And there were better tackles on the board. I think Kansas City got a better tackle at the end of round 2, a real developmental tackle in Kingsley Suamatea. Like, I can't get there. The position's fine. I see the vision. The player is not for me.
Yeah, if it were me, and this once again, I don't run the Dolphins, but if it were me, at that pick, I was looking at either Michael Hall, no, because he went one pick before, it was Chris Braswell. Give me a second edge here, and let's just try to totally rebuild that position early in the draft. Because I think with Lamb and Armstead, they could have kicked the can down the road at offensive tackle for a year. That was my thought process here. That's number one. Number two, unlike other offensive linemen, with Austin Jackson, he kind of failed at left tackle. Let's try him at left guard. Oh, that's not working. Let's try him at right tackle. Liam Eichenberg, we tried him at right tackle, right guard, left tackle, left guard. And then we finally found, maybe he can play center a little bit. This guy's a left tackle. He ain't moving to the right side, and he ain't moving inside the guard. It's left tackle or bust for Patrick Paul. It's one position. That's what he's built for. That's all he's ever done. To try to even move him to the right side, all these things you have to try and fix with him. Now you have to tell him to try and fix it in reverse. And that's going to even put him behind the 8 ball even more. He's a left tackle. He was picked to be a left tackle. They got to work with him, and we'll hope for the best. I think he can be a serviceable offensive tackle in this league. And the fact Tua gets rid of the ball so quick is going to help his case. And that's probably their logic too. We got him. We now have a quarterback who understands get rid of the damn ball, don't hold it. But there's still a lot to work on. So we'll see. But I think too, when we look back at this draft in a year, 2 years, 3 years, it's going to be the Patrick Paul draft because the guys we got later are fine. They're later round picks. Chop Robinson was a logical pick. Who else did you want him to take? This pick, there were options. They could have took the kid from Notre Dame was on the board. Blake Fisher, the kid who went to the Chiefs, like you mentioned, was on the board. There were other guys on the board, and we went with Chop, and we'll see how this plays out in time. But yeah, that's the most polarizing pick of this draft. And as soon as it happened, it was like, oh boy, here we go. Half the fan base was excited we took any offensive lineman, and I would say the people who know, the people who follow this stuff, do the homework, were like, anybody but him. That's kind of the divide. Okay, yep. We spent like a lot of time in the first just 2 picks. Let's try to pick up the pace here a little bit. Then the Dolphins, we're going to go from round 2 to round 5 with no picks. But they traded their own 3rd round pick next year into round 4. And everyone's like, yeah, this is okay. It makes sense if we're going to get some comp picks. Let's move back up in round 4 this year. Let's get a player. And then once again, everyone's kind of, okay, this makes sense. Then they took a running back. And everyone's like, really, a running back? I don't hate. Now, I know you do not value running back style, but it is round 4. But they traded a 3rd round pick. So it's really a 3rd round pick for a running back. Let's just call it what it is. That's number 1. Number 2, though, on most of the draft analysts, boards, Wright from Tennessee, who they took, was either the 1st or 2nd running back in this class on most people's boards. So they got either the 1st or 2nd running back in round 4. And the case that they're making, which I tend to agree with, is Raheem Mostert's been in 2 years. And yes, he scored 20-something touchdowns last year. God love him. But the first year he was in Miami, The biggest game that year was the playoff game. He's on the sideline in street clothes. Last year, we're 9-3. We're going through a collapse where we're watching the AFC East squander through our fingertips. Week 17 and 18, he's on the sideline in street clothes. He's on the wrong side of 30. We gave him a 1-year extension pay bump. Really, that means we can just still cut him after this year if we want, if things don't work out well. So there's no big loss there. And we got Achane, who everyone loves last year, but is undersized and got hurt in training camp, which caused him to miss week 1, played a couple weeks, then he went on IR to play 4 weeks, came back for 1 game, re-sprained the MCL that he was on IR for, and then he played but less than 100%, and the rest of the year he was like questionable each week. He's an undersized guy for a reason, and I know he's put on some weight and some muscle this offseason. Doesn't make him less than what he's still an undersized running back. So I think the thought process is if one of Mostert or Achane go down this year, Jaylen Wright's probably more upside and more potential than like the Salvin Ahmeds of the world and Jeff Wilsons of the world. And then moving forward, the plan is 2025 and beyond, Achane and Wright, your 1A, 1B type split backfield who can, take it to the house from anywhere on the field and that type of stuff. So what are your thoughts on trading the pick, drafting a running back, and drafting that running back?
Yeah, so this is the pick I've struggled the most with to come up with how I feel. I successfully talked myself into to Chop Robinson. I unsuccessfully talked myself into Patrick Paul. Jaylen Wright this one's tough because I like the player. I think Jaylen Wright's a good football player. And obviously, given the speed thing that Miami wants to do at every position on every positional group, he fits perfectly, right, with what they want to do. So you like the player, you like the scheme fit, and even the trade's tricky, right? Because if you told me on face value, hey, the Dolphins traded a future 3 to get back into the 4th round for a running back, I would have told you it's a terrible trade. The value sucks. And that's not untrue, but they're probably going to have 2 comp picks in the 3rd round next year, which okay.
Helps offset this.
Yeah, right? So I'm even having some trouble deciding how I feel about the trade. Because in a bubble, this trade's horrible. This is a terrible trade in a bubble, right? But if you add context, I'm kind of for it. I kind of like it. I
Me
do.
too.
I like the player. I think, but again, this is another 2025 pick. I don't know how many carries Jaylen Wright's. God forbid, I don't know how many carries Jaylen Wright's going to get if guys stay healthy for most of the season. But like you just outlined, they might not. I think one of the interesting things about Wright is, look, everybody knows he's fast. He's fast. He's incredibly fast. A lot of people comped him to Raheem Mostert in college. There's a reason for that. I think I copped him to Justice Hill, who's a back on the Ravens. If you watch some Baltimore football, he's a really good pass protector, Jaylen Wright. I'm very
most rookies wouldn't be.
Exactly. He's really a legit pass protector. He's good at it. Technique. He knows where he's supposed to be. He's got the size to back it up. He packs a little bit of punch at the contact point. So I actually like him getting on the field as a pass protector in year 1. I don't know how often the Dolphins are going to care about that because they just seem to not care in the world about blocking past 1.5 seconds. So we'll see how valuable that is to them. But I really like Jaylen Wright as a pass protector. I think he has good vision. I think he has solid contact balance. And obviously the speed's elite. So look, I think it's a really good value on a player who's more talented than a 4th round pick. So I like this pick. I really do. And do I love the trade? No.
I'm okay with it. I think we're okay with it because of the extra comp picks we assume are coming. Now, here's the deal with the comp picks. Everyone just says, we got 2 third-round comp picks. If Robert Hunt blows out his knee in training camp and never plays, that 3rd round pick's going to go to a 5th or a 6th or something. Yeah. It's not guaranteed a 3rd. Wilkins, because he got paid so much, probably would be a 3rd anyways, but there's a chance, I guess, in a world where it might not be. So those 2 third-round picks aren't guaranteed 100%. They're probably 90% guaranteed, but some fans just assume, we're getting 2. Well, yes, but as long as they both play, I don't even care if they play well, just play, there'll be 2 third-round comp picks, but nothing is for sure. But right. Yes, that was the logic. They're playing the odds here. Yeah, we're probably getting 2 third-round comp picks. Right. We want to trade one so we don't have to go from pick 55 to 158. Totally understand that. And they wanted a running back because here's the deal. Mike McDaniel loves speed, another speed guy. And, no offense, I've seen enough of Salvin Ahmed in my life. I mean, nice. I mean, I don't want to see him on the field in 2024 for the Dolphins. Jeff Wilson, I know, and again, they paid these two in the offseason to keep them, probably because you don't know how the draft is going to play out, but it's not like they don't got contracts you can't cut. Jeff Wilson's got a contract you can cut. Salvon Ahmed's got a contract you can cut, and there's no major cap, significance here. And now that they got this guy, I mean, as long as he just shows up, tries, and is halfway competent, he's going to leapfrog them on the as probably the number 3 running back, just because he has more speed than they do, and he gives them what they want to do. Is when they put both of their running backs on the field at the same time in that personnel grouping, that offense kind of clicks. But when one of them's always hurt or on IR or just not there, staying on the sideline, they can't run that personnel grouping. It's not the same with Salvon Ahmed out there. It's just not. So that's what they're hoping, short term. But again, in a perfect world, he ain't playing much this year. And moving forward next year, we all know Mostert, a little long in the tooth here, and has trouble staying healthy. So I get it. And who would have thought Chris Grier, who never touched a running back in the draft, back-to-back years, round 3 and really round 4 this year, but it cost him a 3rd-round pick, running backs in back-to-back years. A little surprising.
Yeah. Shows you who's really running the team.
Yeah, it's Mike McDaniel.
Yeah.
And that gives Chris Grier someone to point the blame at if this doesn't work out. Hey, he told me he wanted him. I just did it. It's not my fault, which he's a master at. Okay, pick 158. They went edge again with Mohamad Kamara, Colorado State. Unlike Chop Robinson, this guy's all production at college. 30 and a half sacks, 45 and a half tackles for loss. And he, again, 5th-round pick, doesn't have the height, the arm length, all that stuff. But he's a twitchy player who finds a way to get to the quarterback. And around 5, it's well worth the risk there because, A, they need edge rushers. To me, if in time, not even year 1, in time, he is the poor man's Andrew Van Ginkel, that situational guy who comes off the bench just to rush, one-trick pony, just get after the quarterback, that's great. He was picked in the same round as Andrew Van Ginkel. If that's who he is moving forward, I am A-okay with that with a round 5 pick. Not someone you want starting, probably not someone you project to ever start, but just to be that sub-package pass rusher who can get after a quarterback. And, everything tells you he shouldn't. He got the arm, short arms. He just does. And some guys are football players. That's kind of what this kid is.
Yeah, I completely agree. He's almost the direct opposite prototype of Chop Robinson, right? Where Chop is, hey, the film's not great, but we're betting on the traits. Mo Kamara is, hey, the film's awesome, but the traits are a little bit questionable. But that's why he goes in the 5th round and Chop goes in the 1st, right? So, I really like Mo Kamara's tape. Is it's good. There are a lot of draft analysts who had a 3rd-round grade on him. I would have ended up with a 4th had I evaluated him before the draft. So good value, right? Get him in the 5th round, 4th-round value, sure. Really, really like his hand usage, man. I just think he's a technician. He knows how to free himself. He's got repeatable pass rush moves. He's got a real pass rush plan. All that stuff is awesome. And I think it projects really, really well to a designated pass rusher role at the next level. I think when we talk about players having short arms and being small, Kamara is smaller than small. He's really small. He is 6'1", 248, which is 3rd and 11th percentile with 10th percentile arm length. So look, I agree with your analysis. I think he can be that hey, look, man, he's just a football player. He gets on the field. He's really good with his hands. He's got some bend. He's quick, right? That's his best physical trait. He can explode off the line. He can win with some bend around the outside edge. And he's got good leverage because he's short, right? So there's some athleticism there. I'm not saying he's not an NFL caliber athlete. I don't think that at all. But when we talk about size at the edge position mattering a lot, the reason Mo Kamara fell so far below his film is because he's not just an outlier. He's an outlier's outlier. And I think, look, that's fine in the 5th round. That's what you're getting with 5th round. I think expectations for players taken the 4th round is kind of weird. It's kind of a fringe, you kind of have high expectations.
Really, round 3 on is you're throwing darts. I've always
I agree.
First 3 rounds, you kind of know what you're getting. You feel somewhat comfortable. This guy might be a starter by year 2 at the latest, and he will be a significant contributor. Once you get to round 4 on, it's we're hoping for the best. We're hoping for the best.
Well, you're looking for role players on day 3. And I think Mo Kamara can be a very valuable role player. My concern is what we talked about earlier is that they don't have any edges on the roster. And the idea of an opening day edge rotation of Shaq Barrett, Chop Robinson, and Mo Kamara will keep me up at night for months until they do something about it. Because that is, I mean, they are going to get, I don't know who they play in week 1 off the top of my head. I don't even think we have this.
We don't know till next week. Next week we'll find out.
God, next week already. Jesus. Anyway, like if they play a team that has any functional running game, and those are the 3 edge rushers that they put out there in week 1, they might get run on for like 250 yards. Like these guys cannot defend the run. And Mo Kamara is a 5th round pick. He should not be expected to be this 3-down edge rusher type player. Those expectations should not be lofted on him. So here's the thing. I really like Mo Kamara. I think it's a very good pick in the 5th round. I think that any day 3 pick that you project to play any type of good role for you is a good pick. And I think Mo Kamara checks the boxes, just with the understanding that like this is a player who could bust because he's small, right? Like there's a version of this where Mo doesn't do anything because he's so small. And so there's some risk there. But yeah. I think, look, you're betting on the film. The film's good. There's a lot of potential for him to be a, 5-6 sack a year guy. And for a 5th round pick, sign me up.
And let's hope, because Colorado State, not so much in recent years, but they produced some edge rushers in Shaq Barrett and Joey Porter. Let's hope Mo Kamara can be somewhat, maybe not those two, but at least be like next in line of a capable NFL edge rusher. Colorado State, nobody thinks of Colorado State, but they put out some pretty good pass rushers. Hopefully Mo Kamara's one more. We got 3 picks left. I'm going to lump the 2 wide receivers together because 1, they share a last name, and 2, it's like they're kind of not quite the same player, but kind of the same player in some ways. So round 6, pick number 184, Malik Washington, Virginia. And then round 7, pick 241, Tajh Washington from USC. Now, with Malik, a pure slot wide receiver, not a guy who's going to be an outside wide receiver, but as a slot, very productive. And again, he didn't play at any football factories. Northwestern for 4 years, Virginia for 1. So it ain't like he had, big-time guys throwing him the ball. He still got open. He still made plays. 10 of his last 11 games in college, over 100 yards, very few drops. Slot wide receiver, that's Malik Washington. Tajh Washington, little bit different in some ways, but kind of the same. They're both undersized. I will give Miami credit. They stay true to who they are. They want fast, and they don't care how tall you are when it comes to wide receivers. So 2 undersized guys, 2 guys who can also help on special teams. To me, these picks were Robbie Anderson's gone, Chase Claypool's gone, and Braxton Berrios and River Craycraft. When Hill and Waddle were less than 100% last year, you had your chance to step up. You failed. We are now looking for replacements for you. They still have to add a 3rd wide receiver post June 1st. These guys aren't 3rd wide receivers this year by any means. If Malik Washington can be a 4th wide receiver this year, be in some packages in the slot, I think that's probably great in some ways. Tajh, a little bit more of a wild card, I'd say. What are your thoughts on the 2 Washingtons?
Yeah, I'll spend most of my time on Malik because
he's the one who will probably play first.
I'll be honest, I don't know if Tajh is going to make the roster.
Yeah, it's a tough uphill
battle. It's going to be an uphill battle, and frankly, his film there's a reason he was picked in the 7th round. I think Malik is the far more interesting conversation to have, and I think one of the reasons is I actually watched his tape for the first time last night. It is uncanny how similar his usage is at Virginia to how the Dolphins use their receivers. It's the same routes from the same places. It's very weird. What was the big innovation that McDaniel made this year with Tyreek Hill? It was lining him up as an H-back, right? And running him out on those wheels. Flip on the Virginia tape, Malik Washington's at H-back, running routes from the H-back position. So the Dolphins did that draft video, right, where Chris Grier was like, Mike McDaniel's been bugging me to draft you for a couple of rounds now. No, I get it. I do. You watch the Virginia tape and you go, this dude, perfect fit in Mike McDaniel's scheme. I think Malik could develop into a starting slot in the NFL level. I don't know. That's probably not your wide receiver 3, but your wide receiver 4. And again, for a 5th round pick, sure, that's great. I'll take it all days of the week. He's incredibly tough. He's one of the toughest players. He seeks
Fearless.
out contact.
Yeah.
And he's like 5'8", and he took some licks. There was a lick he took in the Miami game. I couldn't believe he got up. James Williams, that big safety, I'm pretty sure, hit him, and he went down. I was like, oh, dude, like he's going to be concussed. He got right back up. I was like, sure, man. He high points the ball really well. He catches everything. He's a really tough, savvy player. I don't know if this is a hot take, but in my mind, it's a hot take. I would not be shocked at all if he's the most productive Dolphins rookie for the first 2 years.
Oh, I agree. I think he's going to be the fourth wide receiver and on the field a lot.
Yeah, I do too.
I think the two edge rushers they're going to play a lot. I don't know if they're going to have a lot of production. Patrick Paul not going to play at all, and the running backs, a third string running back. How much do third string running backs play? Unless there's a major injury, not much. So I think, he's got a chance. And not only because we know how they are, Miami, with their wide receivers. They got Hill and Waddle or the Alphas who get everything. And then after that, assume they sign Odell Beckham just because there's been a lot of smoke around that. And I think in time, both sides are going to meet somewhere in the middle. And if it's not him, it's going to be someone else. I don't know who. I do think this kid, because he's a pure slot, and they're not going to ask him to even try to learn the outside role. He's a slot receiver. That's all he is. He's going to excel because what they're going to put on his plate is going to be limited compared to some of these other rookies. We're going to have so much on their plate. I think he'll excel there. I think he'll get open because he's going to have favorable matchups when Hill and Water are on the field. Jonnu Smith, and if they sign, he's going to have favorable matchups all the time probably, and he'll take advantage of it. Yeah,
and it's good because his role at Virginia was a limited role, not in the sense of production, but in the sense of what they asked him to do. He runs 4 routes and gets a lot of manufactured touches, right? So I think a lot of people see him as like, they see that he's quick and they think immediately, oh, he's a good route runner. He's actually got to learn to run more routes. He really only runs like 4 routes on tape, and they're not the most polished routes in the world. Now, he has the bones of being a good route runner, but that's the difference between being a wide receiver 3 and a wide receiver 4. To me, he's much closer to the wide receiver 4 slot. But he's tough. He catches everything. He is a perfect fit in the Dolphins scheme. I think he makes the roster. I think he makes an impact. And for a 5th round pick, that's great. 6th round pick, even better.
Yeah.
So look, I think that's all good. Tajh Washington, I don't know. I don't think he's going to
I saw a lot of broken plays where he's making plays, which is fine, but I didn't see a lot of structure there. A lot of broken plays.
A lot of good trades to have. The Dolphins do not win on broken plays because the quarterback is not a broken play quarterback at the end of the day. I think if Tajh makes the team, it's because he's the kick returner. That's what I like.
Look, same thing with Salvon Ahmed. I've seen enough of River Craycraft. I've seen enough of Braxton Berrios. Give me some fresh faces as 4th and 5th wide receivers. They're not going to hurt nothing really. And I'll do say though, I do think River might make this team just because as a pass blocker, not as a pass blocker, as a wide receiver who can block, he's probably the best one they got. And I'm not sure they're going to want to part with that, especially in the running game. But I've seen enough of these guys to know they're not going to help you in the passing game any. And let's try some new blood here. If one or they each make the roster, great. If one of them makes the roster, one's on the practice squad, great. Let's see what happens. They needed new blood there. And again, Tyreek's time here. Once they pay Waddle, they cannot pay Tyreek. They can't pay 2 wide receivers, close to $30 million or more. Tyreek's time's coming to an end. And not that these guys are here to replace him, but they're at least, guys who are going to know the system. But when the time comes to replace Tyreek, to be like, okay, we got a 1, we got a 4 and a 5. Let's just get, some guys to be like a number 2 wide receiver, and they'll still have a competent wide receiver room. They don't want to have to replace Tyreek and all the depth. Let's take care of the depth now and then just worry about replacing Tyreek 2025, 2026 when that day comes, because the general manager's job is not just this year. It's about forecasting out of what we're going to need the next couple years, knowing you can't replace everything at once. You got to do it in pieces, and they're trying to fill up the depth in the wide receiver room here. Last pick, we're not spending a lot of time. Patrick McMorris around 6 is a total project at safety. He's a safety who can't tackle. Not that he can't, but a lot of his tackles get broken, which is a bad sign because at safety, you're the last line of defense. If you cannot wrap up and tackle, you will not be in the NFL long. If he's on the team this year, I'd be shocked. Practice squad, hit the NFL weight room, work on some fundamentals. They needed safety help, clearly. Holland, final year. We hope he's back. Don't know. Jordan Poyer just turned 33, 1-year deal. We might not have any safeties on our roster now who will be here next year. So having Patrick McMorris, if you can stash him on the practice squad, coach him up, He's not all bad. He seems like he has a high football IQ and stuff, just can't tackle, which is a big freaking deal in the NFL. So it is what it is. I think post-June 1st, they're going to add safeties there. So I think that's pretty much top of the list. But I get it why they took it, because they need players at safety, and he's a player at safety.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. Like Patrick McMorris is a special teams player. Like he would not factor into the safety conversation for me at all. I think the only reason it's worth having that conversation is because the Dolphins have 3 safeties on their roster, and he's one of them. I think in an ideal world, like this is a special teams player. He's physical. He's got some size. He's a smart player. Like to me, like I do not foresee a NFL safety role for him long-term, even with development. Nope. I just don't. Not being able to tackle is a big hurdle. It's not good. And like, honestly, if he's going to make it, it's in the box, like as a weak side linebacker. And I don't know that he has the size for that. And so there's a lot of safeties who kind of are in that in-between area. I think he can be like a good backup piece for you. And you know what, if he learns how to tackle, I think he'll be awesome on special teams. And you know what, that's a lot of what goes into 6th-round picks is special teams. Can you play on teams? That's a huge deal for day 3 guys. For me, Patrick McMorris, he's going to have to be a teamer like that. That's just, I don't see a version of history where he's a high snap getter on an NFL defense. I don't. His film's just not there. I would not have given him a draftable grade if I had evaluated him pre-draft. But he went in the 6th round, and you know what? You get a good special teams player in the 6th round. Like I'm fine with that. There's nothing wrong with that. You need special teams guys. You know, yeah. I don't scout special teams, but you need them. That phase of the game matters. And so if he plays well there for a few years as a 6th round pick, like that's fine with me.
Just 2 tidbits. You don't even have to comment if you don't want. The undrafted guys, 2 guys I think have a chance are Grayson Murphy, UCLA, the edge rusher, just because edge, we need help there. I think he's got a chance. He's not awful. I mean, yes, he won undrafted, but I think there's something there intriguing with him. And also cornerback Storm Duck, great name, by the way. I think he's got a chance as well at corner because there's a lot to like there. And the only thing I'll say, and I know they paid him a ton of money, and I have no earthly idea why. Why in the hell they gave a guy who's never played football before and Bayron Matos all this money for an undrafted free agent? He's a basketball player, never played football in his life. He's got like the size and the speed. They've tried this a million times with guys, and they usually try to convert him to tight end, or they'll take a wide receiver, convert him to tight end, or they'll take a guy who's played power forward and try to. It never works. And not only they fought other teams for this guy, and they paid him not a ton, but like over $250,000 of guaranteed money as an undrafted free agent to do what, to try to coach him. I know he qualifies as an international player, so there's like an extra roster spot you can hide him on. It's not going to work. I know it's just money. It's not going to work, but to me, it blows my mind that they still continue to try this because it seems like a futile waste of time. But that's what they did with the undrafted. The rest of them, who the hell knows? Last question. Overall draft. Give me 2 or 3 teams that you think had a great draft. Give me 2 or 3 teams you think had a terrible draft. I got my answers. I can go first if you want, or you can go first.
Why don't you go ahead? Because I'm unprepared.
Okay, 2 teams with a great draft. Number 1, the best draft to me was the Pittsburgh Steelers. Pittsburgh Steelers looked at their team, looked at the AFC North, and were like, we understand the assignment. We're either going to start an old quarterback or we're going to start a kid quarterback. We got to beef up this offensive line. And they went last year, they took an offensive tackle in round 1 out of Georgia and Broderick Thomas. This year, round 1, Troy Fontenot. Round 2, Zach Frazier. And then we're going to come back and take the kid from South Dakota State and at pick number 119 and Mason McCormick. We're going to add Roman Wilson as a wide receiver as well. And then we're going to take probably the number 1 linebacker in Peyton Wilson. I thought they killed this draft. That's a brutal division to begin with. And for them to have any chance of even getting a wild card spot, they built a wall for whoever the quarterback is in time. And they added a weapon at wide receiver, and they had a linebacker. I just love that draft so much. And the other one is probably not a shock because you can put them on this list every year when it comes to having a great draft, and that's the Baltimore Ravens. the Baltimore Ravens, probably one of the best front offices here. Nate Wiggins, Roger Rosengarten, Adisa Isaac, or however you say it there, from Penn State. They took Walker, the wide receiver from North Carolina, and they get TJ Tampa, pick 130. I just thought Ravens, that's a front office that hits a home run, and I thought Pittsburgh had the best draft by far.
Those are good picks. I will try to pick different teams. One that really stuck out to me was the Arizona Cardinals. Now, they had a billion picks, so they better have had a good draft. But I thought they did a really nice job. I think Marvin Harrison's really good, obviously. And then I do an exercise every year called the All Hollywood Team, which is just like my favorite prospects in the class, regardless of where they rank on my big board. They drafted several of those guys, so I'm a little bit biased, but they drafted Darius Robinson, who was on that team. Max Melton from Rutgers was on that team for me. Dejan Taylor Demerson from Texas Tech was on that team for me this year. So I really like this group. I think they got a lot better. I think Trey Benson's a good running back. I really like the Cardinals. I'm probably going to end up cheering for them this year when the Dolphins are not around and I'm bored and I need a team to cheer for. I'm probably going to end up cheering for the Dolphins or for the Cardinals in the NFC this year, just because I think that team's fun, and I think they drafted a bunch of players I think are good. I'll flip the script. A team whose draft I didn't like. Now, the chalk answer here is Atlanta, but I like. Okay,
yeah,
I'm
that's
gonna
too
get a little
easy.
bit.
That's too easy.
Yeah, it's too easy. I'm gonna get a little bit more creative. I thought the Titans had a rough draft. I really did.
That was a strange one.
I think I don't think J.C. Latham's going to be a bad football player, but I think that was a panic pick for them. I think that they thought that they were going to get Joe Alt, and then they didn't. And so they drafted J.C. Latham at 7. And I think they could have moved back. I think that they could have done something to get out of that pick and get more capital and still get J.C. Latham. Taking Devondre Sweat at pick 38 is like,
you're going to have fun in those Nashville bars, baby.
Oh, man.
That
is not the landing spot that I would have wanted. I gotta be honest.
He needed to go to a quieter place somewhere.
Yeah,
he needed to go to like Seattle with Starbucks all over the place.
Yeah,
that's
or
where
like
he needed to go.
Kansas City or something,
Kansas
like
City.
somewhere in Middle America that isn't
something
Tennessee.
Like the Bills.
Yeah,
like Dave and Buster's and nothing else.
I like Sweat the player. I hope he works out, but honestly, like even like taking the off the field out of it, I think 38's a reach for him. Like I think that's really, really high to take a nose tackle inside the top 40. Because at the end of the day, that's who Sweat is. And then they took Cedric Gray, Jarvis Brownlee, who are like good players. I think that those are fine. But I don't know. I think you use your top 2 picks on guys who are overdrafted. So besides Atlanta, Tennessee really stuck out to me with a weird draft. And I really like the Cardinals draft. I think that team, like, honestly, they might mess around and steal a wild card spot this year, depending on how good Kyler Murray ends up playing. I like Arizona. I think they got some good players, and Jonathan Gannon's a weird dude, but players seem to play for him. So I could see them, messing around and winning 9-10 games.
All right. Now, I got 3 ones who I have no idea what these teams are thinking. And one of them, I swear to God, is not just a Miami Dolphins bias. I have no idea what the Buffalo Bills are thinking. Buffalo Bills have no wide receivers. They trade out of round 1. Then they take Keon Coleman, of all people, a slow wide receiver. I have no friggin' clue what the Bills are thinking. That to me was just a blunder of blunders. And then they took the kid from Utah, Cole Bishop, who we spoke about last week. Didn't take one pre-draft visit. I don't know what that means, if it means anything. Just strange. They took Dwayne Carter, defensive tackle. Okay, I guess they took a running back, Ray Davis. Not sure they need running backs there. Pick 120. I have no idea what the Bills are doing. They did not really address the wide receiver position. Maybe they're working on a trade for like a Higgins or an Ayuk after the draft. If so, then this makes sense. Until that happens, they didn't get better. And Keon Coleman's just a slow wide receiver. I don't care how funny his press conference was. The next one is the Cowboys. Again, 2 of their first 3 picks are offensive linemen. Tyler Guyton, okay. Cooper Beebe, okay. Marshawn Keelan was their second-round pick right after Patrick Paul. I don't know. I think the Cowboys are going to be in trouble this year. They did nothing in free agency, and they took a couple rookie offensive linemen who we know that sometimes they struggle if they have to play. Just uninspiring, didn't move the needle for me at all. Just kind of blah. And the last one, which First off, the War Room was a freaking joke. Watching the owner's son there wearing a freaking neck brace. What Jacksonville did to me, just take pretty much every LSU player. Well, the owner's son is playing a wrestling angle in the goddamn War Room. Doug Peterson had to be like, what the hell am I doing here? Brian Thomas Jr. at 23 is fine. Mason Smith at pick 48 is probably overdrafted. Jarrian Jones at 96. Okay. Javon Foster, 114. Oh, we haven't taken someone from LSU in 5 minutes. Give me Jordan Jefferson. It's like, I don't know if Jacksonville got any better. Brian Thomas, I think, will be fine. Every pick after Brian Thomas, I'm like, really? That's what you're doing? That was the weirdest. The whole situation was weird, but that class I do not love in the least. Tell me your thoughts on Jacksonville.
I think it's really funny that Jacksonville took 2 out of the 3 LSU defensive linemen and got the worst 2.
That's my point. And it's like
that's my only reaction to that draft is like
justify the pick for Brian Thomas where they got him. They traded back, they got him.
They had to take him.
Help at what?
They had to,
and they need help. Like I can justify that pick. It's every pick after that. I'm like, what the hell are they doing?
Yeah, they had some weird ones. It's a weird roster.
Then you got the owner's son wearing a neck brace, working a wrestling angle in the War Room. Those coaches must have looked at that guy and been like, "Get the fuck out of here." I'm sorry for swearing. Like, get the hell out of here. Really, we don't need this on this night.
I don't follow pro wrestling at all, so seeing that on social media was interesting to say the least.
I mean, that's a strange.
It's going to be a really interesting year in Jacksonville, man, because if they're not good this year, I think everybody loses their jobs, and so like they have. I think they need to win that division. I think they probably need to win a playoff game. Like that collapse last year, like really was bad, and I don't know how much better they got. I think like I don't think the team's bad. Like I don't look at the roster and I'm like, Jacksonville.
Trevor Lawrence has been underwhelming. Everyone came in and had him pegged to be great. He's not bad. He's just hasn't lived up to the hype he had coming in.
I disagree, but that's okay.
But you might not have had him as high coming in. Most people had him as a second coming, and he hasn't been the second coming. He's been good.
I think he's been good. Sabotaged greatly.
Oh, absolutely. Again, look who the owners are. I mean, come on, man. That's not a serious football team right there.
No, I agree. I'm very. Their offseason is very confusing. I don't know how I feel about it. The draft a little bit weird, but at the same time, like if Brian Thomas Jr. is like a good football player, I'm not even sure that they care about, and they should, but. No, like seriously, because like if he's good and they make the playoffs and Trevor Lawrence looks really good next year, like I'm honestly just not even sure you care about the other picks. I'm not saying that's the best process in the world, but
no, it's not.
It's the only thing that makes any sense.
All right, who gets your bad draft here, and then we'll end this.
Yeah, so the Titans for me didn't get it.
Yeah.
I do want to spend some time talking about Atlanta, dude. You cannot the Michael Penix pick. I can't get there, man. And again, I mentioned the all Hollywood team. Michael Penix was my all Hollywood quarterback. Dude's fun as hell. I love watching him play football. Taking him in the top 10 for a team with Kirk Cousins that you just paid. This is not like, Kirk's going to go out the window in 2 years. You know, he's been on the team for a while. This is a success. You just signed him. You did 3 weeks ago. You cannot, there's no version of this to me that's a good pick. I'm sorry. There are people on here who are going to be like, quarterback value, getting the value of a rookie deal. I just like, you are not a team that needs that. You are trying to win football games. You were playing in a division with Derek Carr, Bryce Young, and Baker Mayfield. Go win the division for 2 straight years. Why are you messing around with a rookie contract quarterback? Why? For what purpose? I don't understand. I don't get it. This is not like people be like, it's the Jalen Hurts thing. It's the Jordan Love thing. One, Aaron Rodgers is a crackpot. You never knew what he was going to do year to year. He's thinking about retiring since I've been alive, it feels like. You take Jordan Love at 21, not 8. Or it was later than that because they traded back with Miami. It was like 29 or whatever. Not 8. That's a big difference. The Eagles took Jalen Hurts in the second round. If they'd taken Michael Penix in the second round, I would not have cared. I'd have been like, sure. Yeah, okay. 8?
And they can't move on from Cousins. They gave him a no trade clause.
No.
So here's the deal. Those fans have no emotional connection to Cousins. He's never even probably walked in. I mean, yes, he's walked in the facility. He's never done anything yet because he's rehabbing from an injury. So he goes out there week 1, throws a pick 6, and they lose 20-10. The fans are going to be booing. By week 2, if they get off to a slow start, they're going to be – everyone's going to say, we want Penix. And Kirk's going to go, put him in. I'll sit in the bench. You can't trade me. I'll just – make sure the checks are in on time, and he'll stand on the bench, and he'll never do anything. So why did they do this?
It doesn't make any sense. And like, here's the thing too, is like, we can set let's set all that aside for one moment because I know we want to get out of here.
Yeah,
Michael Penix is not in a bubble. If any team had taken him at 8, I would be equally upset. Like, we can talk about like the fit in Atlanta all we want. He is not a first round talent at quarterback. He's not. And I'm sorry, like, I'm going to go against Peter Schrager again here. He burned me once. He's going to burn me again. Fine. I do not believe that there were 3 teams trying to trade up for Michael Penix. I don't believe it. I don't. Yeah. I'm sorry. I think that's Atlanta. I think Atlanta put that out there so they try to make themselves look smarter than they actually are. I think the quotes that Terry Fontenot gave after the fact were ridiculous. I'm sorry. This pick makes no sense to me. It doesn't. It makes no level. Not on Penix's talent, not on team fit, not on roster fit, not on where you're at, long-term planning. Like, if Michael Penix gets on the field in 3 years, he's going to be 27 years old.
And the owner's going to be 84. Yeah, if I'm Arthur Blank, I'm really pissed because he'll be 82 in September, and it's like he wants to see him win before he dies, clearly. And I don't say that to be mean or funny. When you're in your 80s, like once again, closer to the end than you're in the middle. Let's just call it what it is. Like, why do we pay Kirk Cousins all this money if you guys are thinking about a rookie quarterback and a long-term plan? I thought we're going for it now, and clearly, like, you can't be half pregnant. Are we going for it or not? Like, if you want to wait a year and get a young quarterback next year, like, okay, you could sell me on that. Because A, that player might be better than Penix. And B, we got a year Kirk Cousins. We know he's more closer to the end, too, as a player. The whole thing just makes no sense. It's indefensible on every reason. And we'll see how the Lions do this year. But, again, those fans have no loyalty to Kirk Cousins. In the first, it could be week 1. He has a bad game. They're going to be like, we want Penix. And it's going to, they created it for no reason. And they're going to be like, whoa, we're paying Kirk Cousins all this money. Penix not like, but that's what they created. And if I'm Kirk Cousins, he shouldn't be mad. The first time they even think about putting him on the bench, he should be like, I'll go to the bench and I'll never go back in again. Just make sure the checks keep coming. Because it's like, screw you guys for doing this to me.
Yep. Weird draft.
Weird draft for them. All right. Everyone, thank you for listening. Be sure to follow Dante Collinelli on Twitter at Dante Collinelli and check out his work at alldolphins.com. Thank you, Dante, for another draft season. It's always fun. We'll see how this plays out. Let's hope for the best for Patrick Paul and Chop Robinson that we didn't totally miss there in the early rounds. But I do think the end of the picks, day 3, really were, for day 3 picks, if your expectations are in check, we're actually pretty good. And we'll get some contributors there in time. More 2025 than 2024. Fans, keep your expectations in check. Everyone go to the website, DolphinsTalk.com. Check out all our content there. Follow myself on Twitter at DolphinsTalk. We'll talk to you again after a while. And folks, don't forget, we must put an end to highway profanity.